Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. And I'm gonna read a couple things from Facebook, the funnest place in the land that doesn't actually exist, or at least doesn't exist physically. Um, yeah, so I got into, so I have obviously this thing about the abundance culture, the be prosperous and align yourself with more and lack, all the people that talk about lack thinking. Um, it's not necessarily that I have a problem with it. It's just, well, I do have a problem with it. I have a problem with the way that it aligns with reality. The reality, the idea of limits, and balance, right? Nature um, exists, in a state of balance. When things are out of balance, then, then nature corrects itself. We are way out of balance with our environment or with the ecosystem. Way, I mean, not just a little bit. Um, and nature eventually is going to do, a big old correction on our butts, on our collective butts. Um, and the only way that we can avoid disaster is if we, do the balancing somehow and take ourselves out of balance. And before we even do that, we have to actually recognize that we're out of balance. And that right there is the most difficult piece of the puzzle because, the majority of people, 99.9% of the people don't even recognize that there was, let me lower that. Maybe 90% of the people don't recognize that we're way out of balance. I'm going to be very generous and give it a 10% of the people understand. Uh, anyway, so interestingly, so I have a friend on Facebook and he is like a life coach and, um, motivational speaker, kind of dude. And that's how he, here's the thing is that's how he makes his living and that's how he feeds his family. And I don't begrudge him that, I mean, everybody does something that's ecocidal in order to make a living, that we're stuck in a system. So it's like hard to be, and you have to have a certain amount of belief in the system in order to be successful. So I don't, you know, I don't want to be the jerk that's always jumping on people's posts, what about the destruction of nature and, how dare you? And like, whatever, look what you're doing, you idiot. I don't want to be that kind of person because, that's annoying to some level. And like people are just, doing their jobs and, obviously, personal responsibility and all that. Eventually people need to be responsible for what they do. However, I don't want to be the jerk that's always poking holes in everybody's lifestyles because it just, I wouldn't want, I have to live in the paradigm that we live in, and I have to do things that are ecocidal, even though I'm very well aware of what's going on. And I do everything I can to, mitigate my footprint or mitigate my impact. But I'm stuck right now. I'm stuck in a system, so it would be annoying to me if somebody every time I was going on a trip to go play music, are you going in an airplane, Mr. Sustainability? I get it. That it could be annoying, and I'm the first person to maybe call myself out for my own ecocidal actions. Okay, so anyways, this friend of mine is like a life coach and always talking about abundance and being wealthy and like getting whatever, getting over the limiting thought processes that keep you from being successful, et cetera, et cetera. All fine and well. However, today he had a post about poor folks shit, doing poor folks shit. And I was like, I kind of got a little incensed because it really makes me angry when people, it just felt a little shamey to me. It felt like he was shaming, when you shame people for not having any money and doing poor, stuff that poor people do that have no money, like, make that kind of rubs me the wrong way, like on a big level. Um, and on top of that, I feel like we all need to be doing poor folk shit. We all need to be doing, living a much poorer lifestyles, poorer as in money, not, happiness, joy, um, creativity. I'm talking about poor as in things, material wealth. Um, I think that we could all adopt a poor folks lifestyle, and that would be better for the planet. So, anyways, I jumped on his post and I just, I said, hey, how about the fact that, um, you know, indigenous people and the Amish, do poor folk shit, but they're not destroying nature, and wealth equals basically, wealth equals environmental destruction. So how do you align? I just basically asked him a question. I wasn't really attacky, but I was just like, the question is, how do you align, prosperity or abundance, and the abundance of humans on the planet with the destruction we're doing? To his credit, he answered my question, but he did a really nice big old sidestep, very politically correct sidestep. And I'm going to read you his response. He says, I'm always down for a sustainability and abundance conversation. Here's the sentence. There doesn't have to be a correlation between wealth and destruction. Cheap production tends to be the most wasteful and destructive, with a lot of luxury and wealthier brands moving away from destructive practices and into conscious production and fabrication. The fashion textiles industry is a major contributor to damaging the planet, so I love how many people are still utilize consignment and thrift. Okay, so, it wasn't a terrible answer, although, and there doesn't have to be a correlation between wealth and destruction if wealth is not described as owning or having a lot of money or having a lot of ones and zeros in the bank or having a lot of things. If wealth is described in another way. I did answer back and I just said, but there is a correspondence between wealth and destruction. The evidence says so. Wealthier countries, first world countries. I didn't go into the details, but first world countries, obviously, we consume 3 or 2.8 planets every single year of resources. So we're consuming our consumption, lifestyle. The things that all the humans on the earth are consuming are, we're consuming way faster than the planet can regenerate these resources. So that's fact. That's just evidence of, the fact that we're way over an overshoot. I didn't go into all of that, but I just, wanted to put in people's minds and in his mind, the fact that like there's a physical reality out there. While we're all into the, the spiritual idea of abundance or a spiritual idea of success or well-being, that's all good. But, we also have to recognize physical limits. And physical properties of the universe, and align ourselves with those. And I also had to add in that I see ourselves, if we're gonna, make it into the future, I see that people are going to have to, utilize way less consumption and possibly, an end to the capitalist system. And there was no response to that, but whatever. He was a good sport for indulging me in my arguments. I have to say that. But, I try to be very selective in when I try to engage people in the battle of climate change or the knowledge of climate change, because, you don't want to be the dude that turns people away or turns people off or gets you, if somebody blocks you or unfriends you or they don't want to hear your spiel anymore, then that's that. You can't, there's no more conversation. Isn't this a pretty lady on my cup? Yeah, so the other thing too is that this guy, so the way that this guy and I are friends is that he's a Bernie Sanders supporter and I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and so he's a progressive. And, that's very interesting. And what I've been noticing in the progressive circles is that they're super Green New Deal and sustainability and like, so on this channel, so I'm a progressive and I want to see progressives win elections and I want to see a progressive president because we need to, we're way to the right politically, we're way to the right ideologically, and progressives will push everybody to the left and push the country to the left. And I think that needs to happen. However, on this channel, I am more left than the left, more left than progressives. And I think the progressives need to be pushed even farther left because the Green New Deal has a lot of problems. Sustainable development has a lot of problems. Replacing our entire energy infrastructure with renewables being a great idea, however, carries with it its own set of problems. So I think, on this channel, I would like to encourage and support the progressive movement, the more left movement, but I would also like to push the progressive movement to be more aware of the actual physics, the realities of what it is we need to be doing, not just sustainability or not just sustainable growth, but degrowth, less consumption, less, we need to, we actually, the progressive left would actually be more progressive if they were talking about not just steady state economies, but taking down, and there are a few people out there saying like capitalism is a bad idea and we need to replace capitalism, but they don't really go any farther than that. They just, well, okay. That, again, it's just like the climate change argument, a lot of climate change people are like, well, we're in a really bad place. Got to do something. And, the answers or the path forward are very, it's very sketchy, very minimal. Well, we got to reduce, emissions. Well, how do we do that? You got to, the details, the devil is in the details. We got to we have to have a discussion that's way more detailed about what it actually looks like to not have capitalism or to switch to a socialist economy or to, and there are people out there doing that, but it's this small. The number of those people, and those people have zero visibility because those, only little parts of those arguments are making it onto progressive channels. And I would like to see progressives talk more about how do we replace capitalism or how do we get away from, growth economies? How do we degrow our economy in order to actually be sustainable, and in order to actually not destroy the environment like that? I'd like to see that because it's very safe. Even the Jimmy Dores and the Jimmy Dores and the Graham Elwoods and the Kyle Kalinskis, like, they talk about, pushing left ideas and Green New Deal and all that stuff. But it's like, those are all very safe. They're still in a safe space politically, even though it's very radical to the rest of the country. But, and we don't have time. Jimmy Dore likes to say we don't have time for incremental solutions. I would like to see something like the Green New Deal passed. However, it's an incremental. That still is an incremental solution. We need to go straight over the falls into talking about degrowth, decapitalization, getting rid of much of our production and consumption economy and replacing it with something more, agrarian, less destructive, whatever it is that people are going to be doing with their lives. That's not going to be, flying and driving and, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And that also actually is part of why I talk about 9/11, because it's such a thing that you cannot talk about it, right? Like the left and progressives will bring up the point that the Iraq War was started on a lie, WMDs, and Robert Mueller was one of those people that lied us into that war. For all of you people that think he's a good guy or not a military-industrial puppet, he's a total and complete deep state puppet. He lied us into the Iraq War. So the progressives will talk about that, but they won't talk about the actual reason why the Iraq War happened, which was 9/11, which 9/11 is a lie. So they won't even go, because that's, you can't say that. That's just over the falls. And maybe there are progressive, people. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard, thinks the official story is bullshit, but she obviously can't say that because it's political death. Maybe Bernie Sanders thinks the 9/11 story is bullshit, but he can't say that. It's political death. Um, but, I would love to see the progressive channels kind of take this in a little bit and start talking about this, because saying the Iraq war was a lie is that's a safe space, right? There's a safe political place to be. But you can't go like, well, the reason why we went to the Iraq war wasn't WMDs. The actual reason we went into Iraq was 9/11, and that was a lie. So, I'd love to see some progressive channels take this on. It's very difficult. Jesse Ventura, bless his radical ass soul, is one of the few people that's, is on like major alternative news stations still saying, the bullshit of 9/11, the joke of 9/11. Man, I've been talking a lot. Anyways, I wanted to read another thing. This is from Facebook, and it's kind of long, but very pertinent. Before I get into that, I just wanted to I don't know if y'all saw this, Bill Nye. On climate change, it's not 50 to 75 years away. It's 10 to 15. So pretty big voice in the mainstream media is telling us it's 10 to 15 years away. Not climate change, but like destructive, catastrophic climate change. It's not 50 to 75 years away. Bill Nye, popularly known as the science guy, joined Ali Velshi and Stephanie Rule to discuss the actual threat of climate change and the science behind the warming of our planet. As a TV scientist and mechanical engineer, Nye is known for breaking science down into understandable terms, and speaking with Velshi and Rule, Nye spoke about how climate change was more gradual than a disaster such as Pearl Harbor or 9/11, but the effects were still as serious, if not more. The Trump administration has continued to deny climate change findings and makes scientific reports inaccessible to the public. Nye counters EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler's claim that the threat of climate change is 50 to 75 years out. It's not 50 to 75 years away. It's 10 to 15. So it's a video here. I'll link this, and then I'm going to move on to this post I want to read. So this is a reposting from Mark Dole. And apparently this post has been shared 18,000 times on Facebook. Let me get down here. 18,000 shares. So I don't know who the original author is. I don't know if the original author is Mark Dole. This is posted from a guy named Dave Jack. But it said, reposting from Mark Dole. I realize there is something I have known for some time but never said, and since I have just spent another 4 hours of my life in climate change academia, I have to get this out of my system. Please understand that many of you reading this won't live to an old age and likely will start scrolling after 1 to 2 more paragraphs. Edit. Okay, I was wrong to this point. This is now my second most shared post of all time. Make that my most shared. The IPCC report and the Paris Accord are incredibly over-optimistic, and that commits the world to a target that means the death of hundreds of millions, if not more. But it is worse than that. Even the commitments made by countries in the Paris Accord don't get us to a 2-degree world. But it is worse than that. The 2-degree target is now unattainable unless, of course, the entirety of civilization does a 180 today and is based on geoengineering the climate of the Earth as well as sequestering of every molecule of carbon we have produced since 1987, as well as every molecule we are producing today, as well as every molecule we produce tomorrow, with magical technologies that don't exist, won't exist, and even if they did, would likely cause as many, if not more, problems than they fix. But it is worse than that. The 2-degree target of the IPCC does not factor in the feedback loops, such as the increased absorption of heat due to a drastic reduction in the albedo reflectivity effect caused by 70% loss of Arctic ice, the release of methane from a thawing Arctic. There is more energy stored in the Arctic methane than there is coal in the world. This is called the methane dragon. If the process of the release of the methane currently frozen in the soil and ocean beds of the Arctic, which may have already begun, but if it spins out of control, we are looking at an 8-degree rise in temperature, 8°C. But it is worse than that. The report gives us 12 years to get our heads out of our arses, underestimating the amount of heat stored in the world's oceans, as we discovered in mid-January by 40%. So no, we don't have 12 more years. But it is worse than that. The IPCC report ignores the effects of humans messing up the nitrogen cycle through agriculture, fertilizers, and more. Don't go down this rabbit hole if you want to sleep at night. But it is worse than that. Sea level rise will be not be gradual, even assuming that billions of tons of water that is currently being dumped to the ground level of Greenland isn't creating a lubricant which eventually will allow the ice to free flow into the northern oceans. It is only the friction to the island surface that is currently holding the ice back. Then consider the same process is happening in Antarctica, but it is also coupled with the disappearance of the ice shelves, which act as buttresses holding the glaciers from free flowing into the Southern Ocean. Then factor in thermal expansions. The simple fact that warmer water takes up more space, and it becomes clear that we are not looking at maintaining the current 3.4 millimeter year increase in sea level rise, which incidentally is terrifying when you multiply it out over decades and centuries. We will be looking at major calving events that will result in much bigger yearly increases, coupled with an exponential increase in glacial melting. We know that every increase of 100 part per million of CO2 increases sea level by about 100 feet. We have already baked in 130 feet of sea level rise. It is just a question of how long it is going to take to get there and then keep on rising, but it is worse than that. Insects are disappearing at six times the speed of larger animals and at a rate of about 2.5% of their biomass every year. These are our pollinators. These are links in our food chain. These represent the basic functioning of every terrestrial ecosystem, but it is worse than that. 58% of the biomass of life on Earth has been lost since 1970. That includes the insects above, but also every other living thing on the planet, except for humans. But it is worse than that. Drought in nearly every food-producing place in the world is expected to intensify by mid-century and make them basically unusable by the end of the century. Then factor in the end of phosphorus. China and Russia have already stopped exporting it knowing this. And the depletion of aquifers, and you come to the conclusion that feeding the planet becomes impossible. But it is worse than that. We can no longer save the society that we live in, and many of us are going to be dead long before our life expectancy would suggest. If your idea of hope is having some slightly modified standard of living going forward and live to ripe old age, there is no hope. The civilization is over, but there is hope. There is a way for some of us to come through this and have an enjoyable life on the other side. Every day we delay can be measured in human lives. There will come a day of inaction when the number includes someone you love, yourself, or myself. So we have two options: wake the fuck up, and if we do, we will only have to experience the end of our society as we know it, aka the inevitable economic collapse, which is now unavoidable, but be able to save and rebuild something new on the other side. Sorry, I didn't put my head in this reading. Right there. Bam. And in this next section, next sentence, where are we? This would require deep adaptation, not this sentence. This sentence. Words like sustainability would need to be seen as toxic, and our focus needs to be on regeneration of soils, forests, grasslands, oceans, etc. This is all possible. I like that sentence. Sustainability would need to be seen as toxic. Sustaining the current paradigm, I'm sure, is what he means. Not sustaining our ecosystems, because that would mean the destruction of our current paradigm. Option 2 is the path we are on, thinking that we can slowly adapt to change. This not only ensures that we experience collapse, but also condemns humanity to not just economic and social collapse, but in 4 to 6 or even an 8-degree world extinction. Some people say 3. I am sick of pipeline discussions. I am sick of any argument that is predicated on the defeatist assumption that we will continue to burn oil at an ever-increasing rate simply because it is what we have always done. Fact is if we do, we are not just fucked, we are dead. I am sick of people who don't understand how their food is produced and its effect on the climate. Both carnivores who eat feedlot meat and vegans who eat industrial-produced monocropped veggies, as they are equally guilty here. The consumption of either is devastating. I am sick of tons of shiny new clothes people are wearing without realizing 1 kilogram of cotton takes over 10,000 liters of water and incredible amounts of energy to produce. I am sickened by the amount of that same clothing that hits the landfill in near new condition. I'm sick of the argument that our oil is less poisonous than someone else's. Firstly, no, it isn't. And secondly, it doesn't fucking matter. I'm sick of people that can't even handle the ridiculously small, only the tip of the iceberg of changes we need to accept: a carbon tax. Yeah, bullshit. Carbon tax is the worst idea ever. I wish people would just even stop saying that. I am sick of the fact that the political will seems only capable of focusing on the individual consumer through small measures like a carbon tax, but no elected party seems to have the fortitude to enact policies to take it to the small handful of communities that are responsible for 70% of our current CO2 production. I am sick of my own hypocrisy that allows me to still use fossil fuels for transportation. I am sick of those who use hypocrisy as an argument against action. Whoever is writing this, good on you. I am sick of the leadership of my country that argues we can have economic growth and survivable environment. We can't. I am sickened by the normalizing of the leadership of our southern neighbor who as the most polluting nation in the world, officially ignores even the tragedy that is the Paris Accord. I am sick. Oh, he must be Canadian. I'm sick of the politicians I worked to get elected being impotent on the subject. Nahid and Greg, I'm looking at you. By the way, Drew, you're an exception. I am sick that the next image I put up of my kids, cheese, pets, or bread is going to gain immeasurably more attention than a post such as this, which actually has meaning. I am sick about the fact that all the information I referenced here is easily discoverable in scientific journals through a simple Google search, but will be characterized by many as hyperbolic. I am especially sick that my future and the future of my children is dependent on the dozens of people that saw this post, said there goes Mark off the deep end again, and chose to remain ignorant of the basic facts about our near future. There is a path forward, but every day we delay the path forward includes fewer of us. Build community, build resilience, work for food security, think regeneration. Plant food producing trees, think perennial food production, turn your waste products into resources, eat food that does not mine the soil and is locally produced, eat meat that is grass-fed and holistic or intensively rotated, ideally holistically grazed in a silvopasture that is used to provide nutrients to vegetation, get to know a farmer or become one yourself, park your car, do not vote for anyone who either ignores climate change or says we can have our cake and eat it too, quit your job if it is fossil fuel related. Oh, ouch. It is better than losing it, which you will. Stop buying shit. Stop buying expensive cars and overly large houses, then complain that local planet-saving food costs more than Costco. Stop buying things that are designed to break and be disposed of. Let go of this society slowly. And by your own volition, it's better than being forced to do it quickly. Rip up your lawn and plant a garden with perennial veggies, fruit bushes, fruit trees, and nut trees. Learn to compost your own poop. I'm actually getting into, so I'm going to start composting my dog's poop. I don't know if I'm going to get into composting my own poop, but it's damn intriguing. That takes a whole other level. Where are we? Buy an apple with a blemish. Get a smaller house on a bigger lot and regenerate that land. Plant a guerrilla garden on a city road allowance. Return to the multi-generational house. Realize that growth has only been a thing in human civilization for 250 years, and it is about to end, and make preparations for this change. Teach this to your children. Buy only the necessities. Don't buy new clothes. Go to a thrift store. Don't use single-use plastic, or if you do, repurpose it. I do all these things. Unplug your carburetor and compost everything. Do that. Relearn old, forgotten skills. Don't let yourself get away with the argument that the plane is going there anyway, and when you book a holiday. Understand that there's no such thing as the new normal, because next year will be worse. Understand before you make the argument that we need to reduce human population, meaning the population elsewhere, that it is not overpopulation in China or India that is causing the current problem. It is us and our Western lifestyle. Understand that those that are currently arguing against refugees and climate change are both increasing the effects of climate change and causing millions of climate refugees, which will be arriving on Canada's doorstep, because Canada, due to our size and northern latitude, will on the whole have some of the best climate refuges. Understand that the densification of cities is condemning those in that density to a foodless future. Stop tolerating the middle ground on climate change. There is no middle ground on gravity. The earth is round, and we are on the verge of a collapse. Good stuff. And as I read these articles and these posts, with people kind of coming to the same conclusion that others, Guy McPherson has come to, Roger Hallam, we have these scientists all kind of, scientists who have for a while been saying these things. And then other people, get the understanding about all of this, and then they're like, "Hey guys, check out this information." And it's very encouraging to see more and more voices getting this information and pushing it out there. We need everybody to be saying these things and talking about these things and pushing out the current paradigm, the established paradigm. And we even need to push out, the progressive paradigm is great, but we need to push the progressives farther left. They're not doing enough. They're not talking enough about degrowth or truly sustainable culture, about what climate change truly means to the planet. They're still kind of, dancing around the edges of it. Oh, it looks really bad, the literal, actual, factual truth needs to be discussed, and real proposals need to be put forward for human civilization, not just a Green New Deal. It's great. We have countries declaring climate emergencies. Great, beautiful. The Green New Deal is not necessarily the answer, but it's a start. But it's too incremental. Green New Deal needs to be implemented everywhere on Earth in the next 18 months. And then shortly after that, 18 months after that, we need to have a degrowth, paradigm starting to be put into place. We need to start talking about degrowing capitalism and degrowing, first world countries, degrowth, living in, more agricultural lifestyles. We already, there's so much stuff in the world already that we've produced. If we stopped throwing everything away and really just kind of divvied up the spoils of all of our production, we could, lots of people can exist kind of on just the remnants of industrial civilization alone for quite a while. There's enough clothes and, cars and bikes and things out there, for people to just use. We don't need any more new shit. We need to shut down, obviously the best path would be to shut down the means of production, nationalize production in the name of degrowth and, combating climate change. That would actually be a real solution. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.